Get started here. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ankit Shah, and I'm from the Dopamine Agency. At Dopamine, we basically build creative, gamified, or behaviorally designed solutions, and we offer them to our customers to help drive specific business objectives. Now, I had a talk all planned for today, which was supposed to be about gamification as a strategy, specifically about the enterprise. After talking to everybody yesterday, I asked them, hey, what do you guys think? How was day one? How did the summit go for you? And the predominant answer I heard was, it's okay. So I go, really? All this content, all this knowledge that you guys are seeing, and all you can say to me is, why is that? And what they said to me was, there's just way too much. You guys have been through so many sessions, you guys have learned so many things, you've had so many knowledge bombs dropped in your head that you just don't know how to process it. So I went back over my presentation yesterday and I said, what can I do to make this a little bit different? How can I kind of relieve that stress on you guys? And I thought, what if I went through an entire talk and I didn't use the G word? What if I came at this from a completely different angle and I tried to help you guys with a framework, something that can be shared across the enterprise and not necessarily have to relate to gamification? So, bold risk, but we're going to try something a little bit different today. So, the picture you guys see up here is my home. It's New York City. And although we're always known for being somewhat front-end, future-facing, the mecca, the place to be, the organizations we have here have some similar problems that you would find across the globe. So, to take you guys back a little bit, and I'm going to go into my professor mode and be a little lecture style here, I want to talk about how we got to where enterprise is today. How do we get the models that we've been talking about, you guys have heard about all through the conference, and that we're currently living today? So, if this works. So, where did we originally come from? Well, 1840s. Our entire management model, the way that we have now orchestrated how we do work, was started back then. In the 1840s, in the sewing industry, we suddenly had all these machines that could do different things, a loom, thread machines, etc. We also had loose groups of people who were not organized, and when we were trying to create something that would actually have an end-to-end process, that's where our first hierarchy, and that's where our first bit of corporate America actually came from. So when we were doing this, it was actually really, really interesting to me. You know, there were two main competitive advantages that we were able to get by being in this industrial age and actually organizing in a top-to-bottom way. So very simply put, we got efficiency. Efficiency helped us get things done quicker, cheaper, and actually deliver at the end of the day. And we got economies of scale. We were able to do things we were never able to do before in a resolute manner. Of course, we held this model for a very, very long time. I would arguably say until the 1990s, which took us to the information age. Computers came along. They became a corporate mainstay, a necessity. And when we started having computers, what did that do for us? Well, we went from process efficiencies to information efficiencies. Our business slowly but surely started shifting into the realm of information. And now, we have all this information, but we really wanted to think about, we've collected reams and reams, we have terabytes now sitting just ready for our use, but we're doing nothing with it. And that's how quickly we've now come to the next age. Within 15 to 20 years, we've now transitioned to something that we call the connected age, or, as I'll get to a little bit later, the responsive age. What's the difference here? Well, we have all of these different pieces of data that we've now been gathering and we've now been collecting. And what we've done with them, and what we're going to do with them, has been the big question. We're now at a point where technology, our desire, and our wants all enable us to now respond to that data. And that brings us to the connected age. We're no longer working in silos, or at least hopefully, I know we all are, but the future goal, we'll no longer be working in silos. We'll be able to take all the data and all the information that we have and move them forward in a responsive manner. So let me just give you a little animation here to give you an example. How has the flow of information changed for us over time? Well, before, when we had an idea, when we had information start flowing, well, we had a little bit. We dropped the occasional bits and pieces of information, but we were able to manage that in a pretty efficient way, and that old model worked for us. As time has gone on, you can see what's happened to us. We've now increase the amount of information that we deal with and that we process exponentially. And at the end of the day, we have that little pile that you see at the bottom of the slide. We have this whole big, large pile of information that we just don't know what to do with. And as an organization, as an enterprise, this has now become a very, very big problem for us. So that brings me to my key point and what I'd like to really discuss with you guys today. We're going to talk about taking an organization from the kind of models that we've been discussing and have been around since the industrial age, which are efficient models. They're all about driving to the bottom line. They're all about cutting to how can we do our work as fastly, as cheaply, and that's how we constitute as best as possible. Where I'd argue with all the information we're now generating, including all the things that we talk about with gamification in terms of how we respond to behaviors and the kind of data that we generate, how do we now effectively not be siloed in a way that makes us just think we can centrally plan, but instead respond to the constant changing market conditions, employee conditions, and customer conditions we're bound to run into as an organization today. So to do this, let's actually define what a responsive organization is. So a responsive organization is built to learn and respond rapidly for optimizing the open flow of information that comes at us each and every single day. So taking that very, very simple definition, the really, really important key here is to now move away from that efficient model that I've been describing and I've been talking about to something that's different. If we keep trying to redo the lessons that we've learned time and time again and apply them in our current age, in a new responsive age, we're going to fail. Because it's no longer just about having one central plan and moving forward. What it is about now is responding to the information, the customers, the markets, and everything that we have. And to do that, the kind of gut feelings that we've discovered and that we've culled over time no longer work in this new age. And one of the biggest keys to this is unlearning the past. So if we keep doing the same action time and time and time again, we're going to fail. And so I know you guys are probably going to get to the point where you're like, okay, you're talking about responding to things. So what exactly are we responding to? So now that we've kind of defined responsiveness versus efficiency, and I went a little ahead of myself, let's go over some of the traits that exist in both of these things. So in an efficient organization, and your organization might be a little bit different. I'm not trying to speak for all of you. What I would say is if you really think back to the decisions you made over the past year, they've probably been I can probably organize them within 3 separate categories. So if you're an efficient organization, there's tons of planning. You guys know what you guys are doing a day from now, a month from now, a year from now. So even multi-year plans. But you're not necessarily following the plan. You know, we all have delays, we have roadblocks, we have things happen in our organizations. But we still think we know where we're going to be going. We think we have control. So everything's planned out from the previous point, but we think that things are going to fall step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And we all know that doesn't actually happen in real life, but we at least have the illusion of control. And the last thing that we have is secrecy. So we all think that we work in our silos, and hey, the guy in the next cube, or the guy in the next office, and the guy in the next group doesn't need to know what we're doing. And that's efficient because, hey, we're the only people that are working on things. Well, for a responsive organization, I think these are a little bit different, and they countermand themselves. So, okay. What are the opposites of these things? Well, instead of planning everything out, as we move to agile frameworks, as we move to waterfalls, as we constantly move to lean startup method and things like this, we're now bringing experimentation into our models. This is a little bit different than just planning everything out. But the idea of failing fast, the idea of feeling like you can try different things, is something that would be empowering to an entire organization that's responsive. Autonomy. Everybody always talks about their management. Everybody always talks about, I've been told to do this, or I'm constrained. I've had conversations just here in the past 2 days that say, we'd love to try gamification, we'd love to try behavioral design. No one's going to allow us to do it. No one will give us budget. No one will care. We can't drop these words. They'll think it's a game. And the last one is transparency. Letting the organization know what the vision is for what you're working on. How many times have we been working on a project without knowing what the end goal really is? Who will this touch? Who are our partners? Who are our clients? I'm working on this little silo right here, but I have no idea what the vision is for the company for building whatever product, solution, experience, design, what may have you, comes in the way. So let's go through some really, really common examples that kind of illustrate the difference. So I have a couple of friends who work for Microsoft at Yammer. And so at Yammer, one of the interesting things that happened was actually last year, their chief operating officer has the responsibility of putting together a Yammer team meeting right here in San Francisco year after year after year. And this only happens once a year, but it involves the entire organization, which is about, I'd say, 5,000 to 6,000 people by this point. So last year, everybody complained to him about how difficult it is to centrally plan business travel, something that I'm sure we all have great experiences with. What happened is that they had a certain budget, and the CEO now goes and says, you know what, this is before things that people can be automated or have autonomy for came around. Airbnb, Uber, Priceline, all these things have actually come around and enable people to have the autonomy to do and make decisions by themselves. So he sent out a company-wide memo and he said, you know what, instead of going through our business travel site, which you still can, feel free to just get to the meeting. I don't care how you do it. I don't care what happens for you to get there. Just make your way here. So people were encouraged to collaborate on their internal platform. They were able to communicate with each other, plan trips together. They used things like Airbnb, which was finally allowed. You didn't even have to go to a hotel. They were able to use Ubers or car sharing services to come out and actually share rides with other people. They were able to do the things that any normal person would be able to do when planning their own trip. And so this is what really fascinated to me. Everybody still got to the actual team meeting, and when everybody got to the team meeting, they compared notes. How much did it cost on average for an employee to go through business travel and make it there versus actually going through your own route and just planning whatever you wanted to plan to get here? Difference was, when they did this way, the people who decided to go their own way saved the company on average 40% over just going through centralized business travel. And all it took in this case was a little bit of experimentation and a little bit of autonomy to everybody and complete transparency from the senior management on down that they would be able to do what they wanted, still achieve their business objectives, and really not get in trouble for it. So, I'm running out of time. So, the way, one important point for me to really mention here is that as I'm trying to describe the scale and trying to experiment and try to talk about these experiments and talking about autonomy and talking about transparency, it doesn't matter to go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum altogether. Any progress moving forward, away from a centralized planning model, away from an efficient model, is better than how things are now. And all these things are closely intertwined. So how I've tried to represent that here is through the concept of rubber bands. If you put too much tension, if things are highly planned, but at the same time you're trying to give people autonomy, it doesn't work. The rubber band snaps. So these three kind of traits on the gradient all actually move together. So, as we're kind of going across here, you can see as we stretch, if you're not actually stretching appropriately, what's going to happen is just you're going to snap back, and you're going to go right back to the same patterns that you started with in the same place. So, I want to take those ideas, and after talking to a lot of customers, after talking to a lot of people that work in the enterprise, there's three primary things that we've really come across that seem to be the most important. So the three areas which I think are really important to people here are innovation, pushing innovation in our organizations and in our enterprises, customer service, because at the end of the day, our business exists for a sole purpose, to serve our customers. And of course, leadership, developing the internal tools to drive our organizations forward. So I'll go through and show how the rubber bands actually work for all of these with a couple of examples. So starting with innovation. Why is innovation so important? Well, in the past, when we were dealing with certain types of information, we were dealing with certain types of planning, innovation really wasn't that important. From the industrial age to before the information age, you knew very clearly what your objectives were and where you were going. But in today's landscape, where the market is constantly changing, our customers are constantly adapting, we constantly have to evolve to meet new market needs. So innovation becomes really, really important. So when we're talking about innovation, what actually matters the most here? And again, when we're talking about these three kind of traits, experimentation, autonomy, and transparency, how do we bring experimentation, how do we bring innovation into our organizations? So here's a great example, again, from my friends at Yammer. They started having the concept of internal hack days, and these hack days were gamified. as much as I didn't want to use that word, there are still real-world examples. When you had a hack day, what people really did was they were able to not only sit together, spend time away from normal business objectives, but they were able to innovate. They were able to experiment with anything that their heart desired. They were able to have autonomy to build whatever they wanted. And they were able to be completely transparent to their management, to their own teams, to their own selves, to their own goals, and actually move things forward. And the way they gamify this is by actually rewarding and recognizing the accomplishments that people were able to do within the context of a hack day. What did this really allow them to do? Well, as this kind of shows, just the three things that I mentioned, they were able to push them far away from saying, you know what, we're planning to build a certain product or a certain idea in a certain way. We're going to control exactly the experience that you are putting out there. Or, hey, you can build some cool stuff, but nobody else can know about it. This put them dead center in the eyes of everybody else. Another one, customer service. So now this one's actually particularly my favorite because, again, at the end of the day, we do not exist without our customers. So Lyft is a great example. So Lyft had a unique use case where they're really, really popular in SF, but initially when they first started, they started having a lot of issues with the way that their drivers were operating, the way that they were treating their customers, and even the drivers themselves felt like their customers were treating them in a poor way. So obviously, just like almost every other enterprise, they have a call center. Well, what could they do for their call center? Well, the interesting example for them here, and I'll get to Nationwide, it's a very similar call center case, but the interesting example for what they did here was that in terms of gamifying their call center, in terms of actually being able to recognize and respond to different things within the framework of answering calls, answering emails, answering text messages, even tweets, they didn't have a real way to make sure that they were addressing the needs of every customer. And the way that they actually got there was, of course, trying to, like every other contact center, just use a script. So they'd put a script in front of their call center or contact center agent, and they would say to them, hey, you know what, read the script. So I'm controlling what you're doing, once again. I'm not allowing you any sort of autonomy whatsoever. You can't go off script. And they had horrible, horrible customer service results. People were completely unhappy with their call center. They weren't able to get good ratings. They weren't able to make their customers happy. So the guy who ran the call center just simply said, you know what, why do we need a script? Threw it out the window. So now, Lyft agents don't read from a script anymore. They started just saying, treat these people like human beings, respond, behavior, and this is the behavior design element, start responding in a way that just treats people with dignity and respect. And if you don't know how, just start listening to the calls of some of your coworkers. And this simple design tweak had a 58%, if I'm remembering the number correctly, increase in customer satisfaction scores within a period of 3 months. And all that was allowed here was autonomy, people to act toward each other like normal human beings. Nationwide is another really, really interesting use case that was just like this. And again, these things are more subtle than they are having to overtly put points, badges, and leaderboards on something. This is more along the lines of actually understanding the use case for who the people are that use the product. So Nationwide has an internal collaboration platform that was very, very poorly leveraged. In this context, people were not sharing what they were doing. They were living within their silos. And when they were living within their silos, the company was repeatedly wasting money because they would launch the same exact initiative time and time and time again. And when they would do this, no one knew, no one cared, and they failed again and again. So what did they do? Well, they decided to start gamifying or actually just increasing their internal social collaboration platforms. When they started doing this, people were actually more engaged and more able to use what they had internally, and they were able to dramatically cut down on the kind of overrun that they were having. So what did they allow there? Again, same rubber bands, same framework. They were able to experiment with a different way of doing things. They were able to talk to each other and be transparent. And most important, the one that I like the most, is they were able to be agents of change for themselves. Rather than going to their manager, to his manager, to the CIO, to the CEO, and having everything come from a top-down imperative. So, last one, and again, one that's very, very important, leadership. So, when we're talking about leadership, it's actually a really, really interesting thing for me. So, why is it so hard? as we're talking about a responsive organization, the people who run our organizations have to be ready to change at the drop of a dime. They have to be ready to move in a new direction, and this is something that's extremely hard. People have come through a process. People have come through a particular brand or way of doing things, and when they've come through this way, they're not adaptable anymore. And so when we start talking about responsive organizations, we start talking about how to move forward. The ability to, again, have leaders be empowered, not just because they're at the top of the food chain, but because they actually understand that markets change, customers change, and employees change over time, is critically important. And again, the same thing with experimentation, allowing you from top down, allowing these leaders to say, hey, yeah, you know what? We can try something different. We can do something different, and if it fails, that's okay. It's not large-scale investments from the beginning, but what it is a mindset or a framework that basically says, hey, there's a possibility and a chance to do something really, really important and something really, really different. So, talking about this general framework for the 3 things that are the most important, I hope you guys basically come away with, when you're a responsive organization, when you're trying to do things that actually respond to the reams of data and the constantly changing conditions that you have, it's really, really important to understand that we're moving away from a model which prohibits experimentation, prohibits people to act as their own agents, and prohibits ability to share within the organization. And so if you guys walk away with anything today, that's the main point. I want you guys to know that you can basically move forward, and this is what we always talk about in terms of organizations, and this is what 3 to 5 year projects launch every single other year, it seems, transformation. Moving from the efficient model to the responsive model just basically allows transformation in a way that sticks and is permanent to move forward. So the mission I give you guys today as we move forward is take the things that you guys have learned at GSummit, all these ideas that are now filling your heads and about to burst out, and drive the transformations in your organization. Become responsive, build coalitions. You've met plenty of people here who think exactly like you do, who are ready to drive to the next step of your organization. Leverage them. Leverage the people here who are sharing information with you. Communicate this back in your communities, back in your organizations. Take all this information, bring it back, and make it relevant. And finally, don't be afraid to take anything that you've heard today. Don't be afraid to take anything that you might even think is just a gem of an idea or a little seed that's been placed. Don't be afraid to put it into action. And so, this is basically the whole point of doing anything moving forward from anything that you've learned here. Just truly take this information, take this knowledge, and drive that transformation in your companies. Thank you.